Bit 16, you've never seen a review like this. Weird old games you cannot tame, this world that you miss. SNES Man is the champion, he is 16-bit. SNES Man is the champion, he is 16-bit.
Ho ho ho, my name's SNES Man. Today's game has nothing to do with Christmas or even winter, but it is kind of a present to you guys since it's the most requested game I've ever gotten. It is Kirby Superstar. Kirby Superstar claims on the box that it has 8 games in one, which seems really cool. But if you know anything about 90s game advertisements, they're a bit misleading. It's true that there are 8 games in this cartridge, but some of them are mini-games, not whole, fleshed-out adventures. There's only 5 of those. But they are pretty fun, so let's get down to gaming and start with Spring Breeze, the most straightforward game in the whole collection. Witness Kirby, the almighty puffball of destiny. Kirby is one of the most powerful heroes in the 2D platforming world. Think about it. He can fly, he can eat his enemies, and can steal their powers, leaving a swath of destruction in his wake. This guy is horror movie material. But the little pink hero controls really well. First, you can jump as many times as you want with B, so falling to your death is a really rare experience. That's a relief because instant deaths are infuriating, as any old school gamer should know by now. Second, you can block by pressing L or R, which is a nice touch. And finally, eating your enemies and absorbing their powers is simple. Just press Y to inhale them, and then press down on the control pad to swallow them and steal their power. There are a ton of abilities to choose from, and they're all really well designed. You have the cutter, a spinning blade attack, the sword, bombs, which are great for ripping bosses to shreds, karate powers, fire powers, ice powers, plasma powers, and all kinds of nice ways to savagely murder your foes. This is what makes the Kirby series so great. Initially, it seems like a little simplistic platformer, but it has a lot of hidden depth. All the powers at Kirby's disposal add to the variety and make the gaming experience a lot more complex. Here's Spring Breeze, the first game on the cartridge. It's exactly what you'd expect from a Kirby game, an easy romp through sissy-looking, brightly colored landscapes. Nothing strips you of your masculinity more than playing as a smiling pink ball. Oh no, the first boss is a tree that drops apples on you? Oh, the terror! Close your eyes and hope for better days, children. But seriously, I admit that Kirby wasn't targeted at my age group, and it wasn't trying to be cool and edgy. That's what Sonic the Hedgehog was for. Spring Breeze is a fun little game, even if it is too easy for my liking. It's essentially a remake of Kirby's Dream Land for the Game Boy, which explains its really small scope. Look how small the levels are. If you wanted to, you could speedrun through this whole thing in a matter of minutes. King Dedede is the final boss, and let's just say, he's a pushover. Luckily, the rest of the games on the Superstar cartridge bumped up the difficulty a little bit. Next is Dynablade, a quest to defeat a big old eagle who has invaded Kirby's homeland. It's another really straightforward platformer, but it's more exciting because instead of fighting magical trees and King Dedede, you have some more threatening antagonists, like the eagle, and a really creative turn-based boss battle. I just love this boss battle. It's a parody of old turn-based RPGs where you have to wait your turn to attack the boss, and then the text on the top of the screen makes witty comments about the battle. This humor was really refreshing and it reminded me of Earthbound. Alright, the third game is The Great Mining Offensive. Oh boy! I didn't like this one as much, but I appreciate the effort they put into it. Instead of separating the adventure into multiple levels, it's set in one big map with interconnected rooms, kind of like Metroid but without as much exploration. What really annoyed me about the mining offensive is that you have to look for treasures. The only way to beat it is finding every single little item that's hidden on the map, and there are 50, I believe. And you have to solve little puzzles to find them, and it takes a long time, and I just get bored when I try to beat this one. Maybe if you're a treasure hunter at heart, you'll enjoy it, but I didn't. The more games you beat on the cartridge, the more you unlock. I don't want to spoil too much, but I will reveal that after you beat 2 of the main adventures like Spring Breeze or Dynablade, you get a new game, The Revenge of Meta Knight. This is one of the most fun on Kirby Superstar. It's a lot harder than the previous games, and you have to stop Meta Knight by infiltrating his airship, the Halberd. It's a lot more intense and exciting than the other little games, and actually requires you to have some skill and patience on the boss fights. It's very action-oriented. To beat this one, you need to learn how to use Kirby's powers and make sure you actually know what you're doing. Otherwise, you get flattened by all the crazy stuff in your way that wants to kill you. So, is Kirby alone in all these adventures? No. If you press A while you have an enemy power, you create a little CPU-controlled minion. The minion follows you around and helps you fight enemies and even bosses. These guys are pretty helpful and make the adventure easier. Also, if you can convince one of your friends to humiliate themselves and play Kirby with you, they can control the minion and team up with you. The only annoying thing is that every time the second player dies, you have to find an enemy, steal its power, and then create a new minion for them to play as. It makes player 2 feel like a second-class citizen, and it also wastes a lot of game time because you have to worry about resurrecting them every time they die. Let's talk about the game as a whole. The adventures are all slightly different, but it's not like Super Mario All-Stars where every game has a separate engine with new controls and power-ups. Nope, Kirby Superstar is pretty cohesive, so it feels like one big game. It came out in 1996 near the end of the Super Nintendo's lifespan, so it's fairly polished and modern feeling. For instance, you can bring up a pause menu at any time that displays the game's controls. Also, the graphics are excellent. Just look at the opening cutscene. It looks like something you'd see on the Nintendo 64. The in-game graphics look really nice too, even if they're a bit childish and make you feel like a pansy. Of course, the sprites are huge, so Kirby looks big and plump on the screen. There are downsides to this. I call it Big Sprite Syndrome. I know it sounds like an STD or something, but bear with me. Big Sprite Syndrome is the phenomenon in gaming where characters and enemies are so big and take up so much space on the screen that there's no room for movement or mobility. I complained about this in Jungle Book, my last review, where Kaw the snake was so big that you had no chance of dodging his attacks. Well, Kirby Superstar suffers from Big Sprite Syndrome in a different way. It makes the levels feel really small and constricted. Think about this. Kirby can jump as many times as he wants, so if the game developers had made wide open spaces and big rooms for you to float in, it would be pathetically easy. You could just fly over the enemies. So long, suckers. So the makers of Kirby were probably afraid of this, so they made the stages cramped and force you to fight all the bad guys instead of dodging them. Combine this with the big sprites and you get an occasional feeling of claustrophobia. Maybe it was just me, but I felt a little trapped in this game. I kept wondering, if Kirby can fly, then why are the stages so small? Okay, so I've discussed the big games on Kirby Superstar pretty thoroughly, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't talk about the mini-games, you know, the little guys. First is Megaton Punch. Here's the premise. You're in a contest where you have to time a couple of button presses to decide how powerful your punch is. Boring. Second is Samurai Kirby, where you have to press a button quickly once a sign flashes on the screen. If you have better reflexes than your opponent, you win. Boring. The only mini-game that I liked was Gourmet Race, where you have to race King Dedede through a couple of different levels and eat food along the way. It has some replay value because you can keep going back and trying to get a better score. But seriously, was it fair to call Megaton Punch, Samurai Kirby, and Gourmet Race games? The box included these in the 8 games, and I don't really think that's fair, but oh well. At least they gave you a couple real adventures. What's one more good thing about Kirby Superstar? Well, the music, of course. Killer soundtrack, bro! The songs all fit the game's mood well, and some of them are really famous classic songs from video game history. Things to make it better. Bigger rooms and levels. Maybe if they had made the sprites smaller, they could have achieved this. A more challenging experience. The first few games are so easy that they're not even exciting. Longer games. Kirby Superstar has plenty of games, but most of them end abruptly and feel too short. Still, this is a pretty great game. It scores an 8 out of 10. Well, that's Kirby Superstar. My name's SNES Man, and I hope you enjoyed this review, and that your holidays are merry and bright. I'll talk to you again in 2013.